King true crime story, teenagers murder parents and stage robbery. Ethan and Noah, 16 and 17 years old, were well known in their small suburban town for being quiet and somewhat introverted. They lived with their parents, Lisa and David Parker, in a modest, two-story house. Ethan was the older, more rebellious one, a quiet boy with a simmering anger that often went unnoticed. Noah, on the other hand, was seen as shy but intelligent, often seen reading books about crime and detective stories. Their parents, both teachers, were strict but loving. Despite their outwardly stable home life, there was tension beneath the surface. Lisa, a high school English teacher, and David, a history teacher, had always been demanding, particularly when it came to their son's academic achievements. Ethan had long struggled with feelings of resentment toward his parents, feeling suffocated by their constant pressure. Noah, although more reserved, began to mirror his brother's anger, feeling overshadowed and misunderstood. Over time, their frustrations grew into a more dangerous form of resentment. The idea of running away or living a different life became a constant daydream, but it never seemed like a viable option. By the spring of 2021, tensions reached a breaking point. Ethan and Noah, bonded by their shared discontent, began to fantasize about a world without their parents. These fantasies evolved from thoughts into plans, until one fateful night, they made a decision that would alter their lives forever. The night of April 15th, 2021, was like any other. The Parkers went to bed early, as usual, leaving Ethan and Noah in their respective rooms. The boys had been quietly plotting for weeks, knowing the time had come. They had studied the layout of the house, making sure there would be no immediate witnesses. Noah, the more methodical of the two, had suggested using blunt force to avoid leaving any trace of gunshot residue or blood spatter that would be difficult to clean. They chose a heavy metal statue from the living room as their weapon. Around 3 a.m., they silently crept into their parents' bedroom. Ethan was the first to strike, swinging the statue with calculated force against their father's head. David didn't have time to react before he collapsed, unconscious. Lisa stirred, but Noah quickly subdued her, holding a pillow over her face until she stopped moving. The boys were silent but focused, feeling the adrenaline of what they had just done. They knew it was over, and there was no going back. After the murders, they ransacked the house, moving items around to make it look like a robbery. They even smashed a few windows to add to the illusion. Then, they planted a few personal belongings of their parents in odd places, making it look like the attackers had been in a hurry. The boys knew the next step was critical, to make sure they wouldn't be suspected. So, they staged their own alibis, texting each other from different rooms, creating the illusion that they had been in bed the whole night. The crime scene was meticulously altered, but they underestimated one thing: the power of the investigators' instincts. The following morning, Ethan and Noah called 911, claiming that they had come downstairs to find their parents lying lifeless in their bedroom. They mentioned a robbery, but that was all they could say for sure. Investigators arrived shortly after, and the boys kept their cool, offering coherent but rehearsed stories about the night's events. The detectives initially leaned toward a robbery gone wrong scenario. The smashed windows, the missing valuables, and the forced entry all pointed to a random attack. Noah, who had always been more intelligent, calmly answered the investigators' questions while Ethan played the role of the distressed son. Their story seemed airtight, but subtle discrepancies began to emerge. The boys' stories didn't match up in certain details, particularly regarding the timeline of the events. The investigators also noticed that the boys' emotional responses seemed somewhat muted for the situation. The boys appeared more anxious about the investigation than grieving the loss of their parents. One critical mistake was when Noah, in an attempt to convince the investigators of his innocence, inadvertently mentioned a detail about the robbery that hadn't been made public. The detectives grew suspicious, asking how he knew about the stolen items. His hesitation was a red flag. As days passed, investigators began to piece together the inconsistencies. Their primary lead came when they found a neighbor who had overheard raised voices late the night before the murder. The timing of the argument didn't align with the boys' story, and this discrepancy led them to look closer at Ethan and Noah's backgrounds. A deeper dive into their social media and personal lives revealed a growing animosity between the boys and their parents. The breakthrough came when the boys were asked to provide their clothing from the night of the murder. Ethan's jacket, which he had conveniently disposed of in a neighbor's trash bin, was found to have traces of blood on it, despite his claims that he had never left his room. After a week of investigation, the pressure on the boys intensified. The detectives had enough circumstantial evidence to arrest them. On April 22, 2021, Ethan and Noah were taken into custody for the brutal murders of their parents. During their trial, the boys displayed no remorse for their actions. Psychological evaluations revealed that they both had elements of conduct disorder. But the real issue was the toxic relationship they had with their parents, which had escalated into violent resentment. The boys' lack of empathy and their ability to plan the crime so methodically shocked the community. The trial was a media sensation, with the town divided between those who sympathized with the boys' claimed victimhood and those horrified by the brutal nature of the crime. In the end, Ethan was sentenced to life in prison, while Noah received a slightly lesser sentence due to his younger age. The impact on the community was profound. Parents became fearful of the deep, unspoken rifts that can form in seemingly perfect families. The Parkers' friends and colleagues struggled to understand how two boys they had known their whole lives could commit such an atrocity. As for Ethan and Noah, their lives were forever changed. Locked away in prison, they would spend the rest of their days reflecting on the deadly lies that bound them and the horrific price they paid for their misguided sense of freedom.